The car door slammed shut, and that sound, so sharp and final, cut right through the stillness of my old homestead. There I was, Eleanor, 73 years young, standing right here, watching my only son Daniel drive off. He was heading to the beach, of all places, with his wife Sarah and her entire family for a whole week of sun and sand. Can you believe it? My own boy, off on a grand family holiday with her people while I was left behind. Just me and the quiet hum of the countryside. He gave me this quick, almost absent-minded wave as the car started to roll. It was one of those smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes, you know? And then he called out, "Take good care of the garden, Mom," as if I were just some hired hand, someone whose sole purpose was to keep the flowers watered and the vegetables tended, as if I weren't his mother, the one who literally gave him life and every single inch of the land beneath his feet. My heart felt a little tug, a familiar ache of being overlooked, like a piece of old furniture that's always there, but rarely truly seen. I had personally washed and pressed every single shirt and pair of shorts for those fancy suitcases. My hands, calloused from years of working this very land, had carefully folded each item, imagining them laughing and playing by the ocean. Meanwhile, my week stretched out before me, filled only with the unchanging country sun and the profound silence of this big house. That silence, it can be a comfort sometimes, but right then, it felt like a cold, heavy blanket settling over me. It was the quiet of being left out, of being forgotten in plain sight. They truly believed I was fragile, didn't they? Just a little old lady, good only for puttering around with plants and animals, someone who belonged in the background, like I was just another fixture in the house they already spoke of and moved through as if it were entirely their own, already part of their future plans. The emotional coldness in their departure was something I'd felt before, a subtle distance that had grown over the years. But this time, it was sharper, clearer. It was an outright act of silent humiliation. What they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly grasp, was that the deepest, strongest roots of this place, this homestead I'd poured my entire life into, weren't tangled in the ancient oak trees or even in the sturdy foundations of the house itself. No, the strongest roots were in me. They ran deep, connecting me to every stone, every whisper of wind, every memory woven into this soil. Their trip, I could feel it deep in my bones, wasn't just a simple holiday outing, some innocent break by the sea. It was something else entirely. It was the first quiet step of a bigger plan. A plan that, if I didn't somehow find a way to stop it, would rip me away from everything I had built, everything I knew, everything I loved in this world. It wasn't spoken, but the air around them, the way they avoided my gaze, the eager haste in their movements, it all screamed of something more calculated. The thought was a chilling whisper in my ear, a premonition I couldn't shake. I stood there for a long time, rooted to the spot, watching their car disappear down the long, dusty dirt road. The dust swirled up behind them, a hazy cloud that settled slowly, just like it did on countless other days. I remembered vividly, no, this was different. This was the eerie calm you feel just before a storm breaks. The sharp, almost painful clarity of someone who finally understands they have to fight. It wasn't a question of if a battle was coming, but when, and who would be standing at the end of it. What they never, not in their wildest dreams, could have imagined was that by leaving me alone, by thinking they were simply getting me out of their way for a week, they were actually giving me the most precious gifts, time and silence. And in that quiet, that absolute solitude, I would finally have the space I needed to remember exactly who truly held power in this place and how I was going to use it. And in that quiet, that absolute solitude, I would finally have the space I needed to remember exactly who truly held power in this place and how I was going to use it. My name is Eleanor. I am 73 years old, and this homestead, every single blade of grass, every stone, every whisper of wind through, it always has been. I didn't just arrive here. I became part of it, like the earth itself. I came here with my late husband, Arthur, over 50 years ago. We were young then, just starting out. Our hands were full of dreams, big, hopeful dreams. And our hearts? They were overflowing with love. Love for each other, and love for the simple idea of building a life from scratch, right here on this land. Together, we built this house, piece by piece. We laid every brick, hammered every nail. We planted every single fruit tree you see thriving around us now. And we watched our only son, Daniel, grow up running wild and free through these very fields. His laughter used to echo, light and joyful, carried on the breeze. After Arthur was gone, after he left me all too soon, I didn't stop. I couldn't. I continued our legacy, kept our dream alive, just as we had always planned. It was harder, yes, but I was strong. I always had been. I was never one for fancy things, not for grand luxuries or sparkling jewels. My true wealth was always something different. It was the rich, deep smell of wet earth in the morning after a good rain. It was the sweet, bursting taste of the tomatoes I picked with my own hands from my garden, still warm from the sun. That was my luxury. That was my gold. Arthur, bless his heart, always said I had a better head for business than he did. He'd chuckle and say, "Eleanor, you could sell ice to an Eskimo and they'd thank you for it." And it was true, anyway. I was always sharp with numbers, very particular. And I was always a woman of my word. It was me who managed the harvest earnings, year after year. It was me who sat down, sometimes late into the night, negotiating prices with the buyers from the city. And it was me who carefully, meticulously, kept all the important documents filed away safe. Daniel, my son, he grew up watching me do all of this. He saw me working, managing, making things happen. But as time went on, it seems his memory, at least when it came to me and my capabilities, grew short. He began to see his strong, capable mother not as a force, but as a tired old lady. Someone who needed help managing what had always been solely hers. And I let him. I truly did. I loved my son more than anything in this world, more than words can say. And because of that deep, unwavering love, I allowed him to take the lead on some things. I truly believed, with every fiber of my being, that he was looking out for our future. for the future of this homestead. I trusted him. I even gave him the bank passwords, thinking he would use the money for the good of the place, for necessary roof repairs, for my medicines, for anything we needed. I saw the gleam of ambition in his eyes. Yes, I did. But my mother's heart, always so quick to forgive and understand, simply refused to believe it was greed. It just couldn't. I kept telling myself, no, he means well. He's my son. But that kind of love, the kind that blinds you, the kind that makes you see only the best, even when the truth is staring you right in the face, that's also the love that one day forces us to open our eyes, and it often happens in the most painful, most undeniable way imaginable. The kind of way that makes your stomach clench, a knot of dread forming in the pit of it, knowing that something, everything, is about to change. And that change, that coldness I felt growing, it didn't hit all at once, like a sudden storm crashing down on the homestead. No, it was far more insidious, like a slow, creeping chill, settling into the very bones of this old house, making everything feel just a little bit harder to bear, a little less joyful. It started subtly, you see, in the way Daniel and his wife Sarah would talk. At first, it was just little comments, barely audible sighs, about how this place, our home, was becoming a burden. They'd talk about the endless work, the sheer effort it took to maintain the fields and the house, the isolation out here, as if these were complaints meant only for the walls, never directly for the woman who had poured her entire life, every drop of her sweat and love, into every inch of this place. Sarah, bless her heart, she was a city girl through and through, always had been. She'd never really held a hoe in her life, not a proper one, anyway. Never felt the deep satisfaction of turning the earth with her own hands. And she'd look at my hands, the ones that had nurtured this land for decades, calloused and stained with earth, marked by years of honest labor. I could feel her eyes on them. It wasn't quite pity in her gaze, not outright disgust, but something in between, a veiled It stung, like a tiny splinter, but deep, lodged right under the skin, a constant, irritating reminder. Our family visits, which used to be these warm, comforting gatherings, filled with laughter, shared meals, and old stories, they started to change too. They became these formal affairs, almost like business meetings, where the main topic of conversation was always the homestead's financial difficulties. Daniel would go on about this and that, exaggerating every little expense, making it sound like we were on the brink of ruin. And always, always there were these thinly veiled hints. Oh, how much more practical it would be, they'd say, to live in the city. How much easier life would be for everyone, especially for me, without all this land to worry about. They never came right out and said it, never directly proposed it, but the message, the underlying current, was perfectly clear. I was the problem. This homestead was the problem, and I, being so deeply rooted to this place, was just getting in the way of the life they truly wanted for themselves. But the real turning point, the undeniable final straw that broke something precious inside me, was this trip to the beach. Not just any trip, mind you. This was a grand, week-long vacation with Sarah's mother. They didn't invite me, you see. They simply informed me of it. as if they were giving me instructions, not extending an offer to a loved one, like you'd inform a child about something they needed to know, or a caretaker about their duties, not a person you respected enough to share your joy with. "You'll be fine, Mom," Daniel said that day they told me. He barely looked me in the eye when he said it, his gaze flitting past my shoulder, towards the door, towards anywhere but me. It was so dismissive. "It'll be good for you to rest," he added, almost as an afterthought, as if my life here was nothing but endless toil, and a week of solitude was a grand, thoughtful gift bestowed upon me. And then, right in front of me, with loud voices and bright smiles, they extended the invitation to Sarah's mother. There were hugs, excited chatter about hotels, and the shimmering ocean views, all while I stood there, an uninvited guest in my own home. I, the one who cooked their meals, the one who had kept this home running for half a century, was treated as the silent guardian who would stay behind, ensuring everything would be in order for their grand return, so their lives wouldn't be inconvenienced one bit. I was the maid, the caretaker, the quiet fixture that held their world together, keeping the lights. My throat tightened, a lump forming in it, but I pushed the words out anyway. "I'd like to see the sea too," I managed to say, my voice a little rougher, a little more desperate than I intended. It's been so long. Maybe I could. But my words, they just hung there in the air, unheard, unacknowledged, lost. It was as if I hadn't spoken at all. They had already decided. I was the silent obstacle to the comfortable, burden-free life they wanted. And leaving me behind was simply the easiest, most convenient way to ignore me, to forget I even had needs or desires beyond their own comfort. The pain of that exclusion, of being so openly dismissed by my own flesh and blood, it was sharper than any knife, because it didn't come from strangers, from some distant enemy. It came from those to whom I had dedicated every minute, every ounce of my existence. My son, the boy I raised, the daughter-in-law I welcomed into my home, trusting her with my heart. They were the ones cutting me out, piece by painful piece, making me feel like an outsider in my own life story. And as I packed their bags, folding their neat, brightly colored clothes into those big suitcases, the very same suitcases I had so meticulously washed and pressed just days before, I felt like I wasn't just folding fabric. No, it was far more than that. I was folding my own dignity. Each shirt, each pair of shorts, a layer of my self-worth being tucked away, hidden from view, crumpled and forgotten. It was a humiliation so quiet, so profound, that it left me breathless, hollowed out. It felt like an ending, a final painful chapter in a story I hadn't realized was being written without me. A story where I was being written out entirely. The day of their departure arrived, heavy and quiet, draped in a kind of silent humiliation that settled deep in my bones. I woke before the sun, as always, the old rhythms of the homestead, a comfort, even on a day like this. I prepared breakfast, just like any other morning. The smell of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the kitchen, a comforting scent that tried to mask the chill in the air. I served them all, Daniel, Sarah, and Sarah's mother. who was already chattering excitedly about the beach, completely oblivious, or perhaps uncaring, of the atmosphere in my home. They ate quickly, with the hurried movements of people eager to be rid of an obligation, their eyes already elsewhere. There were no lingering glances, no genuine smiles of appreciation for the meal I'd prepared. Just a rushed consumption, a silent counting down of minutes until they could leave. There was no "Mom, will you take good care of yourself?" "No, my son, your mother will miss you." Nothing like that. Instead, as Daniel pushed his chair back from the table, his words were, "Mom, don't forget to water the tomato plants." He said it with the casual authority of someone giving instructions to a hired hand, not a son speaking to his own mother. It was just another task, another demand, another reminder of my place in their world. He leaned down, quickly, almost perfunctorily, and placed a dry, fleeting kiss on my forehead. It was the kind of hasty goodbye you'd give to a distant neighbor, someone you might wave to across the fence, not the deep, heartfelt farewell you'd exchange with the woman who gave you life and raised you. Sarah offered a thin smile, already halfway out the door, her attention on the suitcases being loaded into the car. Then, just like that, they were gone. The car engine hummed, then faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of gravel crunching under tires. Then nothing, just silence. The absolute, heavy silence of the empty house swallowed me whole. It wasn't the usual comforting quiet of the homestead, the kind that lets you hear the wind through the trees or the distant bleating of a sheep. No, this was a different kind of silence. It was vast and echoing, a profound emptiness that seemed to press in on me from all sides. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I walked through the rooms, slowly, my footsteps echoing back at me. Each step felt heavy, burdened. I saw the remnants of their hurried presence, a damp towel thrown carelessly over the back of a kitchen chair, a dirty glass left in the sink, a magazine discarded on the floor by the couch. Little things, yes, but each one a tiny, sharp reminder of their casual disregard, of the haste with which they had left, leaving their mess, their life, for me to clean up. It was a tangible mark of their expectation that I would simply be here, waiting, tidying, keeping everything in order for their return. I felt the full weight of abandonment in that moment, in a way I had never felt before. It wasn't just the physical absence that hurt, though that was a raw ache in my chest. No, it was the confirmation, solid and undeniable, that to them, I truly was just part of the furniture, a silent fixture in a useful tool, perhaps, to keep the homestead running, to ensure their comfort, but nothing more. I drifted to the porch, drawn by an old, familiar comfort, and sat down in the rocking chair. It was Arthur's chair, the one where we used to sit side by side, planning our future, dreaming our dreams. I reached out, my fingers tracing the smooth, worn wood of the armrest, feeling his ghost beside me. I looked down at my hands, resting in my lap. They were gnarled now, covered in age spots, but still strong, still calloused from decades of hard work. So much sweat, so much effort had gone into this land, into this house, into making a life here. And in that quiet, the terrible, deafening quiet, the truth struck me with a clarity that was both searing and chilling. They saw no value in my sweat, no worth in my labor, no dignity in my hands. All they saw was the potential, the cold, hard money this land could yield. The inheritance. They hadn't just left me on the homestead. They had abandoned me in it, like a relic, a forgotten thing, left behind in the place they intended to claim for themselves. That silence, that profound emptiness, did not bring me peace. Not a bit. Instead, it brought a terrible, stark clarity. A clarity about what I truly represented to my own son, to his wife, to the very people I had loved and nurtured with every fiber of my being. And it was not the image of a beloved mother, but of an obstacle, a burden, a forgotten tool. The realization was a cold, sharp blade twisting in my heart, shattering the last fragments of a dream I hadn't realized I was still holding on to. The realization was a cold, sharp blade twisting in my heart, shattering the last fragments of a dream I hadn't realized I was still holding on to. But that raw sadness, that deep, crushing weight of abandonment, it lasted for exactly one afternoon. It clung to me, heavy and suffocating, as the hours slowly ticked by. The sun, my constant companion on this land, began its slow descent towards the horizon, painting the sky with the very colors I loved so much. Oranges, purples, fiery reds, all bleeding into each other. I watched it from the porch, my eyes dry, my mind numb. And as the last golden rays stretched across the fields, kissing the tops of the trees goodbye, something inside me, deep within the pain, that sharp, insistent ache, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to give way. It made room for a different kind of feeling, a calculated coolness that was entirely new to me, a stillness born not of defeat, but of resolve. I didn't cry anymore. There were no more tears to shed. They had dried up, leaving behind a hard, quiet determination. I got up from Arthur's rocking chair, the one where I had felt so broken just moments before. My movements were slow, deliberate. It was a place no one else really touched, a room that had always held a special, almost sacred silence. I walked straight to his old wooden desk, the one with the worn leather top. My fingers, steady now, reached for the top drawer, the one no one but he, and now I, ever opened. Inside, tucked beneath some yellowed photographs of our early years on the homestead, photos of a young Arthur and a hopeful me, was the folder. It was old, a thick, sturdy cardboard folder, a bit faded now, but still strong. And inside it were all the homestead documents, every single one. My mind, which had felt so muddled and lost just hours before, was suddenly crystal clear. I remembered every signature, every single clause, every tiny detail that Arthur and I had made sure to register with the county clerk all those years ago. We had spent weeks carefully going over every word, making sure everything was exactly right. He had insisted on it for my protection, always saying, "Eleanor, we need to make sure this place is truly yours, always, no matter what." It was an agreement, a silent pact we had made, meant to protect my future, to ensure I would always have this home. And in that moment, sitting there in the quiet office, the last light of dusk fading through the window, I remembered the immense power those papers gave me. A power that Daniel, in his blind arrogance, in his eagerness to rush off to the beach with his new family, had completely forgotten about. He thought he was so smart. He had the everyday bank passwords, yes, the ones I had given him, trusting him to manage things for the good of the homestead. But I still had the deed. The original deed. The one that clearly stated who truly owned every single inch of this land, every brick of this house. He thought he managed the money, the paltry sums he allowed me access to for medicines or repairs, but I owned everything that produced it. Every tree, every field, every animal, all mine. I didn't act on impulse. Not then, not ever. The Eleanor who planned this homestead with Arthur, the Eleanor who managed the finances and kept us afloat all these years, she was a woman who thought things through. I spent that entire night awake, not from insomnia, not from tossing and turning with worry, but from planning. My mind was sharp, focused, laying out every detail. I remembered conversations I had overheard by chance, little snippets caught on the wind when Daniel and Sarah thought I wasn't listening. Whispers about a city apartment, hushed discussions about how a place with nurses would be so good for me, so much safer. The pieces of the puzzle, scattered and confusing for so long, suddenly clicked into place, forming a clear, undeniable picture. The trip to the beach wasn't just a vacation. It was exactly as I had feared. It was the first, quiet, calculated step in their plan to get me out of the way, to remove me from my home, from my life. And it was there, in the profound silence of that night, surrounded by the ghosts of my past and the stark clarity of my present, that I decided I would not be the victim of this story. Not me, not Eleanor. I would not let them turn me into a forgotten old woman, cast aside for their convenience. I would fight, and I would start by putting my own house in order, quietly, meticulously, without a sound. They had given me time. They had given me silence. And in that time, in that silence, I had found my strength again. 2 days later, the phone rang. It wasn't the usual gentle ring, the kind that signals a friendly chat from a neighbor or a delivery. No, this was a shrill, insistent demand, cutting through the quiet hum of the homestead. I knew it was him, even before I picked it up. It was Daniel. And his voice wasn't anything like the calm, relaxed tone of someone enjoying a beach holiday. It was raw, filled with a mix of panic and anger that practically vibrated through the line, even before he spoke a single clear word. "Mom, what happened with the account?" he practically shouted, the words tumbling out in a rush, desperate and accusing. "I went to pay for the hotel, and the card was declined. I tried to make a transfer, and it was blocked." I could hear him taking deep, ragged breaths on the other end, the sound of his frustration palpable, almost like a physical presence in the room with me. And in the background, a faint but distinct sound, Sarah's voice, equally desperate, a sharp, anxious whisper I couldn't quite make out, but the tone was unmistakable. They were clearly in a terrible mess. I took a slow, deliberate breath. My voice, when I spoke, was as calm as the still water in the morning pond. completely unruffled. "I don't know, my son," I said, drawing out the words just a little, letting them hang in the air. "It must be some problem with the bank's system. Enjoy the beach." There was a note in my voice, a tiny, almost imperceptible edge of cynicism, a quiet satisfaction that was new to me. It was something I didn't even know I possessed, a quiet power simmering beneath my calm exterior. He hung up on me, not with a polite goodbye, but with a furious click, the sound sharp and final. He didn't wait for another word from me, just ended the call abruptly, promising to sort this out when he returned. His anger, his panic, that was my confirmation. The big sum of money, the one they had likely intended to use for a down payment on that city apartment they'd whispered about, that place with nurses they'd planned for me, it had hit a wall. Their grand plan already crumbling around them, even before they reached their destination. In the following days, the phone became an instrument of their desperation, a constant source of disruption. It rang constantly, its insistent sound echoing through the quiet house. It wasn't just Daniel anymore. It was aunts and cousins, people who hadn't called me in years, suddenly checking in. "Eleanor, are you all right?" they'd ask, their voices tinged with a concern that felt hollow, forced, almost theatrical. "Do you need anything at all?" They asked about my health, about the homestead, about everything but the obvious reason for their sudden attention. It was transparent, really. I knew what they were doing. Daniel had clearly gotten to them, painting me as the confused old woman, the one who was suddenly being difficult, the obstacle. It was a veiled pressure, a subtle attempt to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt myself, to think I was senile and wrong for whatever I had done or hadn't done. They wanted me to feel alone, cornered, surrounded by a family that was clearly on his side, subtly nudging me back into line, making me believe I had nowhere to turn. They thought they were building a wall around me, isolating me, making me feel like I was truly alone in this. But with each call, each carefully worded question, each forced concern, instead of feeling more alone, I felt stronger in my decision. Their transparent efforts, their clumsy attempts to manipulate me, they only sharpened my resolve. It became clearer and clearer. The betrayal wasn't just Daniel's anymore. It was bigger. It was from everyone who became complicit in his plan, everyone who chose his side, their own desires outweighing any loyalty or love for me, their own share of the future inheritance hanging in the balance. The silence of the homestead was no longer empty. It was filled with the quiet hum of my own power. I was not alone. I was in control, and I was waiting for them to come home. They returned earlier than I expected, just 2 days after that frantic phone call. The familiar sound of their car on the gravel road was different this time. Not the eager rush of departure, but a strained, heavy crunch. Their faces, when they stepped out of the car, were grim. The easy vacation smiles completely wiped away, replaced by tight lines of frustration and a sort of bewildered anger. They didn't even bother to unpack first. They stormed into the house like a small, agitated hurricane, demanding explanations, their voices sharp and agitated, echoing in the quiet rooms I had come to appreciate so much. I simply stood by the kitchen table, the true heart of this home. I watched them, calm and steady, as they paced, and gestured, their words a torrent of accusations about the bank, the accounts, the ruined vacation. When they finally paused, breathless, waiting for my reaction, I just looked at them. Then, with a quiet gesture, I invited them to sit down. My voice was even, a gentle ripple in the stormy air. Why don't you both sit? We have some things to discuss. Daniel looked wary, but Sarah, still red-faced and agitated, slumped into a chair. Then, with deliberate slowness, I reached for the old, worn folder I had placed on the table before they arrived. It was the same one I'd retrieved from Arthur's office days ago. Daniel looked at it, confused, his brow furrowed, trying to make sense of this strange scene. Sarah, ever impatient, rolled her eyes, a gesture of exasperation I knew all too well. She wanted answers, quick ones, about the money, not some dusty old papers. You wanted to sell the homestead, didn't you? I said, my voice firm, without a tremor. Cutting through the silence that had suddenly fallen, I saw the immediate shock on their faces, a sudden, stark paleness. Their mouths opened slightly, but no words came out. Their eyes darted nervously between me and the folder, and then, for a split second, between themselves. It was my answer. You wanted to buy an apartment in the city and put me in a nursing home. The words hung in the air, heavy with the truth they couldn't deny. You planned everything, I continued, my gaze steady, holding theirs. You truly believed this place was yours by right, didn't you? That the money in the bank, the money I worked so hard to put there, was yours to spend as you pleased. You had it all figured out, every detail of my future, neatly arranged for your own convenience. But you forgot one crucial detail, a very small detail, perhaps, in your grand scheme, but one that changes everything. I opened the folder then, its old cardboard creaking softly. My hand trembled slightly, but not from fear, from the weight of the moment, the enormity of what I was about to do. With a gentle push, I slid the original deed across the table, turning it so they could both read it clearly. This homestead, every single inch of it, is solely and exclusively in my name, I stated, my voice clear and strong. It was an agreement your father and I made many years ago. An agreement to protect my future, to ensure I would always have a home, always be safe here. Daniel snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it frantically, disbelief warring with dawning horror. Sarah leaned in, her face contorted, muttering something about a mistake, about it being impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was the truth. Then, calmly, almost serenely, I reached back into the folder. I pulled out another document, freshly printed, crisply folded. This one was newer, dated just yesterday. It bore the seal of the city lawyer's office, the same lawyer who had helped me with Arthur's estate so many years ago. I placed it gently next to the old deed, and as for the will you, Daniel, counted on so much, the one you always assumed would leave you everything, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, but holding a steel core. It no longer exists. I had it nullified yesterday. Your name is no longer on anything of mine. Not on the homestead, not on any bank account, not on anything. Their reaction was a sight I will never forget. There was no anger, not anymore. Only pure, unadulterated despair. It washed over their faces, stripping away all pretense, all rage, leaving behind a stark, terrible realization. Their plan had not only failed spectacularly, but in their arrogance, in their desperate grab for what wasn't theirs, they had lost everything. The very homestead. This place where they had sought to humiliate their mother, to sideline her, to discard her as easily as an old piece of furniture, was the very place that had revealed their powerlessness. The power, the true power, had always been here, with me. I didn't shout. There were no triumphant cries, no harsh words of retribution from my end. Just the quiet, unshakable dignity of a woman reclaiming what was rightfully hers, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity, out of a fierce need for self-preservation and justice. The air in the kitchen, once thick with their demands, was now filled only with their silent, crushing defeat. And in that moment, as I looked at them, I felt a strange, profound sense of release. It wasn't the end of a story, but the undeniable beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I would finally live on my own terms, free from the shadow of their greed and ingratitude. But what would happen next? To them, to me, to this land? The answer hung in the air, an unspoken question. The air in the kitchen, once thick with their demands, was now filled only with their silent, crushing defeat. And in that moment, as I looked at them, I felt a strange, profound sense of release. It wasn't the end of a story, but the undeniable beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I would finally live on my own terms, free from the shadow of their greed and ingratitude. But what would happen next? To them? To me? To this land? The answer hung in the air, an unspoken question. After that day, the house became silent again. But it was a different silence entirely, not the heavy, oppressive quiet of abandonment, but a silence of pure, deep peace. It hummed with a different kind of energy, one that was light and free. Daniel and his family, their faces still etched with that terrible despair, left shortly after. They took with them not only their suitcases, but also the suffocating tension, the unspoken anger, the constant undercurrent of manipulation that had hung in the air for years. It was as if a great dark cloud had finally lifted from the homestead, revealing the clear blue sky above. I didn't feel alone, not even for a moment. Instead, I felt free, truly, wonderfully free. For the first time in a very long time, the house and the land, every single blade of grass, every ancient, the sun still rose early, painting the sky with the same beautiful colors. I still woke with it. The chickens still greeted me with their eager clucking, and the garden still called to me, waiting for my hands. I still tended my plants, pulling weeds, watering the tomatoes that were beginning to ripen, caring for my animals, milking the cow, collecting fresh eggs. These were the rhythms of my life, etched into my very being. But now, each task held a completely new meaning. It wasn't about taking care of things for them or preserving an inheritance for a son who didn't appreciate it. No, now I was cultivating my own future, nurturing my own peace. Every seed I planted, every vegetable I harvested, felt like an act of self-care, a quiet assertion of my newfound freedom. The first thing I did, once the dust had settled and the air felt truly clear, was to sit down with a good estate manager. I found one through a recommendation from my lawyer, a kind, understanding woman who listened patiently to my story. Together, we meticulously organized all the finances. We untangled the complicated threads Daniel had woven, secured everything properly, and ensured that the home. She came over one afternoon, bringing fresh baked bread, and we sat on the porch sipping iced tea, just talking. I told her about my thoughts, about the idea that had been gently blossoming in my mind since that day in Arthur's office. The idea of transforming a part of the homestead, not for profit, but for purpose. A project to welcome other women from the region. Women who, like me, might need a quiet space, a place to rediscover their own strength. Or simply a hand up when life had been hard. Martha's eyes lit up. Her enthusiasm was contagious, like a warm ray of sunshine. She became my great partner, a true friend who understood the vision in my heart. Together, we began to dream of a place that would generate not just fruits and vegetables from the fertile soil, but also opportunities, support, and dignity for others. We talked about workshops, about sharing the bounty of the land, about creating a little community right here, steeped in the quiet beauty of the countryside. The energy I once spent worrying about my son's ingratitude, about his schemes and his coldness, I now used to build something new, something that truly mattered, something that extended beyond myself. The peace I found in those weeks was not in revenge. No, there was no bitter satisfaction in seeing Daniel's defeat. The real peace came from rediscovering my own worth, my own purpose. It came from understanding that my strength wasn't dependent on others' recognition, but on my own clear mind and clean soul. I was Eleanor, the woman who built this life, who defended it, and who would now use it to cultivate something beautiful for the future. The homestead wasn't just my home anymore. It was a testament to resilience, a quiet sanctuary, and a fertile ground for new dreams. I felt alive, clear-minded, peacefully starting over, my feet firmly planted on the earth that was truly mine. I looked at this land today and saw not what I lost, but everything I recovered. I looked at this land today and saw not what I lost, but everything I recovered. That's the true story of it all, you know? Just about the deed or the bank accounts or even the feeling of having my own home back. No, it was so much more profound than that. I recovered my strength. The kind that had been buried under years of quiet sacrifices and unspoken expectations. I recovered my voice, the one that had been silenced, pushed aside, deemed irrelevant by those who thought they knew best. And most importantly, I recovered myself, the Eleanor who was sharp, capable, full of dreams, not just the mom or the little old lady who was only good for watering plants. We spend our lives, don't we, pouring ourselves into our families. We give and we give, believing with all our hearts that love is a beautiful two-way street. We nurture our children, we support our partners, we sacrifice our own desires, all for the sake of those we cherish. And in that giving, sometimes, without even realizing it, we start to lose ourselves along the way. We become just a function in the lives of others. The mother, the grandmother, the caregiver, the one who always looks after everything. We forget that we are also whole, independent beings with our own names, our own dreams, our own needs, our own intrinsic value that isn't tied to what we can do for others. We become so accustomed to being defined by our roles that we forget who we were before or who we still are beyond those roles. And you, who are listening to me now, sitting wherever you are, perhaps feeling the quiet hum of your own life, have you ever felt invisible in your own home, like you're just part of the background, a silent presence that's always there but rarely truly seen or appreciated? Have you had your voice silenced, perhaps subtly, perhaps not, by those you helped to grow the most, the ones who stand taller because of the very ground you provided? Have you been treated as a stepping stone for others to climb, always giving, always supporting, always there to lift them up while they climb higher and higher, forgetting that you too have your own dreams, your own desires, your own life that is just as valid and important as theirs? It's a quiet pain, isn't it? The kind that sinks into your bones, not with a sudden crash, but with a slow, creeping chill. It's the feeling of being overlooked, of your wisdom being dismissed as old-fashioned, of your experiences being waved away as irrelevant. We, as older women, often find ourselves in this position. The world seems to rush past us, and those we nurtured, those we poured our very essence into, sometimes see us as burdens, as inconvenient reminders of a past they'd rather leave behind. They forget the strength that built their foundations, the resilience that carried them through storms, the love that shaped who they are. They forget that our dignity isn't something that fades with age, or with wrinkles, or with slower steps. Our dignity is inherent, a birthright, something that remains, shining bright no matter how others choose to see it. It's about being treated with the basic respect that every human being deserves, regardless of their age, their role, or their ability to produce. It's about being seen as a complete person, full of life, wisdom, and continued purpose. But here's what I truly learned, sitting here on my porch, watching the sunset over the fields I love so much. That deep, quiet pain, it can also be a catalyst. It can be the very thing that wakes you up, that reminds you of who you truly are. Remember that it's never ever too late to take back the reins of your destiny. It doesn't matter how old you are or what challenges you face. That strength you need, the one that feels elusive or lost or even extinguished, it is not somewhere out there waiting for others to give it to you. No, it is within you, always. It's waiting, just waiting for the right moment, for that spark of understanding to blossom. Just like the seeds I plant in this fertile land, carefully nurtured, they burst forth with new life, reaching for the sun, proving that even after a long winter, there is always spring. my story isn't over. It's just beginning, a new chapter. A chapter not about what was taken, but about what was restored, what was reborn. And that's a beautiful thing to witness, to live, and to share. The new chapter here on the homestead is unfolding slowly, beautifully, day by day. The air itself feels different now, lighter, cleaner, as if a long-held breath has finally been released. Every morning, when I step out onto the porch, as the sun begins to paint the sky, I feel a profound sense of peace. It's not the absence of trouble, because life always brings its share of little challenges, but it's the absence of that heavy, internal conflict, the constant ache of misunderstanding and betrayal. That's gone. Now my days are filled with the true joy of living. I walk through my garden, my hands gently touching the leaves of the tomato plants, checking the ripening berries. There's no rush, no pressure, just the quiet satisfaction of tending to something truly mine. The earth under my feet feels solid, grounding, like an old friend embracing me. I listen to the birds singing, louder and clearer than before, and the gentle buzzing of the bees in the wildflowers. These are the sounds of freedom, of a life lived on my own terms, finally. Martha, my dear friend and partner, comes over often. We sit on the porch, sipping iced tea, just as we did that day. But now our conversations are filled with hope and excitement, not just quiet understanding. We talk about the future of this homestead, not just as a farm, but as a haven. The idea of welcoming other women here, of creating a space for shared wisdom and support. It fills my heart with a warmth I haven't felt in years. We're planning the layout, dreaming up workshops, envisioning laughter and companionship filling these old walls once more. It's a project born not of necessity, but of abundance, of a desire to give back, to share the peace I've found. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, I sit in Arthur's rocking chair, just as I always did. But now, when I look out over the fields, I don't see the dust of departure or the shadows of what might have been. I see the vibrant green of new growth, the promise of harvest, the endless cycle of life. I see the wisdom in every furrow, the strength in every tree. And I see myself not as a victim, not as an old woman who was almost cast aside, but as a woman reborn, with a purpose that feels clearer and brighter than ever before. This land, my beloved homestead, it's not just my home. It's a living testament to resilience, to the quiet power of holding on to your truth. Even when the pain of what happened, it's still there, a faint echo, but it doesn't define me anymore. It has transformed into a kind of quiet strength, a knowing. I understand now that some relationships, even those forged in blood, can turn into burdens when greed takes root. And I learned that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that free you the most. It wasn't about punishing Daniel, not truly. It was about protecting myself, about reclaiming the dignity and peace that were always mine to begin with. It was about standing firm in my own soil, my own truth. I hope, wherever you are, whatever path you're walking, that you take a moment to breathe, to truly feel the ground beneath your feet. Remember that your story is still being written, and you, my dear friend, hold the pen. You have the power to shape it, to choose your own chapters, to find your own peace, no matter what storms you faced. Don't ever let anyone diminish your worth or make you believe that your life is anything less than a grand, incredible journey. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this one, pay attention. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you're still subscribed to the channel and hit the bell icon. There are so many more quiet truths to share, so much more connection to build, one story at a time. It's a way for us to stay together, to keep sharing these moments of understanding and warmth, to remind ourselves that we are not alone.